Hello, I'm Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, and welcome to another episode of the RSO Roundup. We've got a great show for you today. We have Riverside Police Chief Larry Gonzalez. Super happy to have him on. We decided that part of the Sheriff's Department, part of what we do on a day in and day out basis is interact with our local police departments. And what a better person to have on is than Chief Gonzalez, who is the chief of our largest city police department in the county of Riverside. So, Chief Gonzalez, glad to have you here.
Thank you, Sheriff, and I feel honored that I'm the first police chief you had on your show.
Absolutely.
But yeah, just to kind of, it's a good segue that you said, talking about us working together, just to talk a little bit about what I think the public gets confused on sometimes. I've heard some people say like, oh, you guys are the Sheriff's Department, and the Sheriff's Department, you are the Police Department. Normally, if an incident happens and it's really bad, then we like to say it was the Sheriff's Department and vice versa. But the reality is the working relationship that we've established over the last couple of years. I know at least since you and I have been in our positions, I'm not saying it wasn't always a good working relationship. I can say being in this position, I've seen it strengthen a lot more than I have seen in the past.
I agree.
I think that goes not just from your and mine relationship, but even you look at like our investigative units, the way they work together, our SWAT teams, our tactical teams work together. Very good working relationship that's it's encouraging.
Yeah, and I think to your point before, a lot of the, I think a misunderstanding or maybe just the misconceptions from people is that because it's Riverside Police Department and Riverside Sheriff's Department, they assume it's the same thing. And people, I guess they just think that we're both the same. So I know there have been times where people have either thanked me or been mad at me for something that happened that I knew was Riverside Police. Yeah. And you and I have talked where you've got the same thing. And it's just one of those things where people, they don't necessarily, I think they don't care about who comes to help them just as long as they get helped. And I think where we are as a working relationship, I think that's where we have evolved to, where we don't see those county and city lines anymore. We just go out and work with each other and take care of our residents.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had people ask me when my next election was as well. I'm glad I don't have to go through that like you do. But, I also get a lot of this with how we work together. There's our city's 88 square miles, and there's several bordering thoroughfares in our city where if you go down, we'll take Van Buren, for instance, where you can go down in a 2-mile stretch and have 14 different buildings that one's the county, one's the city, one's the county, one's the city. And there's a couple schools on that border where if there's a major incident that it's very likely that both of us will be responding. I think, I know I can speak for our community in Riverside. They're very welcoming to any first responder that gets there, whether they're wearing tan or they're wearing blue, as long as the problem gets dealt with. Yeah. And, over the years we've talked about, we both have helicopters in our agencies where there could be something that happens where your helicopter's in thermal and on a situation or in Banning, say helping there, and then something happens in Moreno Valley. Well, we're close. We're obviously going to help. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this point. Something that changed about 5 years ago was PSEC. And it was so frustrating. You can remember when you were a deputy and I was a police officer, I could get in a car chase into Home Gardens, which is your area, and the deputy's in the chase with me and we can't talk to each other. Yeah. That was so frustrating. And when PSEC came along about 5 years ago, we finally had that operability to be able to communicate with our partners, you guys. Right. I can think of every major incident we've had in our city. Unfortunately, we had 2 officers killed in an 18-month period, and both doing the after action report, the biggest problem was always intercommunication. Yeah. Being able to communicate with our Sheriff's Department because everybody's coming to help in those situations. Yeah.
And for the people, listening about PSEC, that's our radio systems. That's how we communicate. And historically, we've all been isolated in a technology age where we can all sit and talk to whoever we want with our little computers in our pocket that we call phones. Yeah. But yet law enforcement coming to work together and help each other can't communicate directly. And that was always a huge issue that we've resolved now. Countywide, we're almost there. We still have a couple of our partners in the desert that are still trying to work their way off of the system that they were on, but they're gradually coming on to the PSEC radio system. and it certainly does make it easy. I know even I've been responding to incidents where both of our agencies are involved in a pursuit that's going to a certain location, and it's easy to just flip the channel and listen to everybody and hear what everybody's doing, and that tactical and really that safety aspect of that. I think for the general public, they would assume that's always been the case, but strangely enough, it wasn't.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things we've fixed. And then I do get questions all the time, and I really don't know the historical aspect of this. I know it went back. I believe it was San Francisco for one, and then the state actually has some type of a regulation about sheriff's uniforms. But people always ask why we wear a different color than Riverside. Why does Riverside Police wear blue, and why do you have tan and green? And I really don't know if I know that answer, other than for the most part, blue or black is a police department, and sheriff's departments are usually tan, green, or a combination of both.
I don't know the historic back. Like I said, even when I knew for California anyway, it seems like majority of the agencies, police agencies, are blue and tan and green for the sheriffs. However, my stepfather, worked at Anaheim PD in the 60s and 70s, and they were tan.
Really?
So I at some point it changed. I'm going to think in the 70s where it was always blue. But and we'll tease each other, go back and forth. You need to wear the blue and be on the varsity team. I always tease, but we're all cops. We're all law enforcement officers. We all have the same mission. And but yeah, I tease people when I first got, I didn't even know what all this meant. I didn't know. I knew the stripes, I thought, was the biggest guy on the department. That was the head honcho, which was a sergeant. But I didn't know what 1 bar meant, what 2 bars meant, what stars meant, how many stars. So as you go along in your career, you progress, you realize all that comes along with it. But now I value that, though. I value the tradition in our police department just as you do in your sheriff's department.
Yeah. And from a fashion sense, we all know that everyone looks better in tan and green. But
you look thinner in blue, though. I don't think so. The camera might add some pounds to it.
From a professional standpoint, we're all doing the same thing, and the people should know that regardless of whether it's someone in a blue uniform or someone in a tan and green uniform showing up, we're there to help them, and a lot of times we're there together, helping each other help the residents. So it all works out well. And then the city of Riverside is surrounded by all of our areas,
Correct.
whether they're contract cities or whether they're county areas.
Correct.
So our agencies really do interact a ton together.
Yeah.
We have a great relationship, training relationship, even with our SWAT teams, with your Metro team and our SWAT guys that train together, that debrief together,
Yes.
and even respond out together to certain calls.
Yeah.
I know that there have been times where my guys have our SWAT team wasn't available, so we
Correct.
utilized yours to come out and do search warrants or
Same for
something
us.
like that. And the working relationship that we have together, people need to know that we're all there for them, and regardless of what agency we're for or city or whatever. I like to say that those lines in the street that separate the city of Riverside from Moreno Valley or from Jurupa or from Home Gardens or Woodcrest County area. Criminals don't care about those lines.
Bad guy doesn't care about that.
And if we cared about them, then we wouldn't be as successful as we are.
And I personally, I feel very fortunate too, just along with those lines. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to teach at your academy for well over 20 years. And throughout that time, in fact, there's every day if I see an RSO deputy, I was fortunate to have them in the academy. I taught a few different learning domains, taught a lot of defensive tactics throughout the years. So you get to kind of know your brothers and sisters in tan and green over the years, and it's kind of neat. I'm getting old now to where some of them are lieutenants and captains.
Yeah.
But very fortunate to have that working relationship with them and see them progress along their career.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's a bad point when we're sitting and talking about the people that started after us that are retiring.
Yes. Or the one when I was teaching the academy, where early on it would be like, hey, my buddy's going to the academy, keep an eye out for him. Now I get it where, hey, my son's going through the academy.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting old.
From those same people. I know it's crazy. One of the things that you and I were talking earlier before we started, it was how lucky we are to be in Riverside County. And I've said this over and over and over again, especially recently in the last year and a half, is that from a law enforcement perspective, we are kind of on an island in the state of California, and with the relationship that we have with our community. Our politicians all support our police.
Yes.
The board certainly supports the sheriff's department. Our residents are overwhelmingly supportive and appreciative and proud of their law enforcement agencies. And I think that we are unique in we don't have the same problems that you see on TV or that you hear about other places happening, especially in the last couple of years with the anti-police rhetoric that's been going on. And we've seen some terrible things on TV and everything else, but knock on wood, we don't experience those here. And in California, you were mentioning about we took care of some of those issues a long time ago.
Correct. Excuse me. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I talk about this quite regularly in my community groups is, we had a very controversial shooting in 1998, the Taisha Miller shooting, which a lot of people remember. And we were under heavy scrutiny, not just in California, but nationwide. And we didn't really, I was here as a police officer when that happened. And I always thought we were a great police department. So we had some legislatively mandated changes we needed to make. And we're kind of resistant to that. Like, hey, you're telling us we're messed up. Why do we have to change these things? And I won't go into the whole thing about a consent decree or stipulated agreement, but one of the key parts was our engagement with our community. And I think we're lacking in some of the areas in our community, whether it's faith-based or grassroots or school districts or chamber of commerce, whatever it may be. We've made a very conscientious effort the last 20 some odd years to be represented everywhere in our community.
Yeah.
So we have been, and now we hit 2020 where that national narrative comes up again, where people are pounding all the police departments and sheriff's department about reform and change. And we felt very fortunate that we were way ahead of the game. So these reform asks you're giving us, we had to educate our community. We've been doing that for years. We don't do this.
Yeah.
Or here's what we've done.
While that incident happened to your agency, it still affected all of us around.
Absolutely.
Whether it's our other police departments or us as a sheriff's department. And we do try and learn from not necessarily mistakes, but the actions and the whole debriefings that we do after of incidents, we all try and learn from them. We all try and share. And so whether it be the consent decree or whether it be lawsuits from Los Angeles or San Diego or even somewhere up north, we get those and we learn from those and we make those changes. The training that we do is just so much different than across the country. We really are. The people are in California are really blessed with a more educated, more trained police department and sheriff's department, law enforcement officers. So it was different for us during that time because you don't want to seem defensive, but you kind of have to politely say, well, we've been doing that for a long time.
Exactly.
And we did learn.
I remember going to schools and training after that happened, and you would go around the room and introduce yourself and your agency. They go, "Oh man, we heard about you guys," and it was a difficult time, but we became a much better department. All of us did. We all learned from that, and we look at where we're at now. Like I'll go back to what we all went through in 2020, and I tell this story that when we had heard that there was going to be thousands and thousands of people who were going to protest in the city streets of Riverside. And most of them to peacefully protest their First Amendment right, but there's going to be a couple hundred there that are here to destroy property and burn our city down. You know very well, I reached out to you and other neighboring agencies, even the CHP and some other folks, and everybody was there right on the spot to deal with 8,000 to 10,000 people. And sure enough, we did have a couple hundred that tried to destroy property, but we really came out of that unscathed, comparatively speaking to other, you look at the news, you look at Portland and Minneapolis and Detroit, Seattle, all these other that were just getting burned down. We got a lot of praise for that, the way we handled it. And with no officer injuries, no deputy injuries, 7 arrests out of all those people. And
no injuries to the public.
No injuries to the public, and low vandalism. A couple things happened as the dispersal order was given. But I think a lot of that had to do with the backing of our community. And I guess I can speak for Riverside. I have a council that's very supportive. I have a city management team that's very supportive. And it's like you said earlier, it's not like that. And we talk to other chiefs and sheriffs around the state, and it's just it's just controversial every day they go to work. So I'm so thankful for that we have not just the city leadership, but the community at large. And that's because of the relationships we've been able to establish over the years. And I always give praise to our officers that are on the street. If they weren't doing the professional job that they do every day, we probably wouldn't have that support.
Yeah.
And if we're not giving them the message where they can feel like they trust their sheriff, they trust their police chief, then we lose our community.
Absolutely.
So that's first and foremost.
Absolutely. You talk about relationships. Our police departments and the sheriff's department throughout the county, particularly us now as leaders, the relationships that we've built between all of us as the heads of our agencies filters down into the working troops, into the frontline workers. And we meet regularly. We're every 2 months. We're at our cops meetings.
Every 2 weeks we talk.
Exactly. And then our conference calls every 2 weeks. And in those, for the public, we're talking about critical incidents that we're all having, that maybe intel things that we've learned that we all need to be aware of, that something's coming in one of our cities or one of our county areas. And we filter that down to our command staffs and to our troops.
Correct.
And we're the communication and the working relationship that we have, really Riverside County is one agency. We are all working together on the same page of making sure that this place is better than our neighbors.
And it helped me tremendously going through the pandemic to have those meetings. Well, we were doing weekly at that time, to be able to get on the conference call with other cities in our county and, hey, what are you dealing with? Or what are you hearing? Or how's your council reacting to this? How's your community? What kind of calls are you getting? And we're able to brainstorm and really get on the same page that, yeah, I'm getting the same type of calls. How are you dealing with it? I get some ideas. Hey, this is working in Palm Springs. Maybe we'll try it in Riverside. Or the sheriff's department's doing this. Let's try that. But it was so beneficial for me to have that constant dialogue. And that's why we've kept those meetings the way we have. We still continue to meet.
Yeah.
So it's great to exchange information and it could be intel. It could be anything.
Yeah. So just to change a little bit, I know this is affecting all of law enforcement, and you and I really haven't had this conversation yet, but hiring. I mean, we're all hiring. We're all trying to recruit from the same pools or find new pools of candidates. It's a struggle for us because of the size of the agency, the amount of people that we have to hire. How is it going for you guys?
Well, I think we're all dealing with the same struggle. It's a little bit more, I like to tease you. We used to be able to get a lot of RSO folks come over. They've slowed down quite a bit the last couple of years for some reason, but probably the leadership. But we're struggling to find, because we're not going to lower our standards.
Right.
We're not going to do that. You lower your standards, you get people in, and then that's just going to get you problems on the back end. Yeah. Something is going to happen.
And I won't call anybody out, but we know in our line of work, one of our local agencies, at least California agencies, experienced that years ago. Correct. Where they did lower their standards, and then several years later they paid the price for that.
Absolutely.
And where I say we learned about all of the bad things, and we try and learn from other people's mistakes too. We're certainly not going to do that.
And also, I think one of the reasons we're able to, we have the interest there, which every time, I'm sure you do this, when I get new, I call them kids, young officers that graduate the academy, I sit them down in my office. I'm like, why in the heck do you want to do this job right now? To convince me. And I'm so rejuvenated after I talk to them. Like they make me feel better. Like they are in it for the right reasons. It's still I think, my humble opinion, one of the most noble professions out there. I think you feel the same way. But they're in it for the right reasons. We're also seeing a steady stream of laterals. And I think a lot of it has to do with, going back to your comment earlier about being an island, is our officers still do police work. They're going to take people to jail. They're going to arrest people. I know there's other counties in the state of California that they feel like everything's falling on deaf ears. They're doing it for nothing. They're going to arrest somebody. It's never going to get prosecuted. It's never going to get filed. I'm wasting my time. And I think our officers feel like they're coming here, they can do their job.
Yeah.
If there are guns on the street, we've taken more guns off the street, as you guys have. It's like doubled every year since 2019.
I remember last year as we were going through all of our meetings and everything else and talking about trends or whatever it is, all of us were talking about the substantial amount of guns that we were finding and arresting these people and everything else. And then in hindsight, looking back now, after all of the statistics have come out about crime rates and increases and everything else, everyone across the country knows there's a huge crime rate. Riverside County, compared to everyone else in the state, is substantially lower. We did go up a little bit, but nothing like other people.
Yeah.
And you can't help but believe that the proactivity that we encourage, that we the morale that we're building, and the energy and the excitement of our officers and our deputies to go out there and make a difference, you can't not believe that relates to the lower crime rate. It has
Absolutely.
to. When you have Los Angeles County that increased 94% homicide rate increase from 20 to 21, and ours in Riverside County went down 28.
Yeah.
And it's the work we're doing. It's the work that deputies are doing. And one thing, I'll pat both of us on the back. We encourage that, and we back our officers for going out there and doing the right thing and being proactive. And we stand behind them. We believe that's what we believe works.
That's right.
And I think that the morale the increase in morale that causes is allowing them to go out and do their job and go out and be that proactive cop.
That's right.
And take people to jail. Luckily, we have a good DA that prosecutes them.
Absolutely.
And so maybe a judge might not give them the sentence that we want, but we're not discouraging them from going out and making that arrest again. And I think the residents of all of our cities and our county areas are benefiting from that. And
I think the officers, you're right, and they feel like it's not for nothing. They're going to arrest somebody. And this is what, we'd be on a whole different podcast if we talked about homelessness, which is you and I talk about all the time. But, our officers go to your academy. They'll spend 965 hours in an academy of training. And you know how much they get dealing with homelessness? They get 0 hours on that. And then they go out on the street with their field training officer and they spend half their shift dealing with homelessness.
First call, probably.
First call. But what I've had to explain is we've had to change our mindset to where I realize livability problems. I got to make sure we evaluate our officers on how they deal with these now. It is part of our job responsibilities, how they deal with an encampment. Because I tell people all the time, we are the walking, talking tax dollar. They want to see us. And I know it's not a big crime. I know it's not, a robbery suspect, home invasion suspect. That will happen, and we will get them. We're really good at the big stuff. We always catch those guys, but they also have to deal with livability issues, and it's been a tough thing to change because it's really not what you sign up for. But we know it's part of our responsibilities now because that's what the community expects from us is to deal with that.
And I know I've heard you talk about it before about the livability issues, and we do the same thing, say the same thing. I call them quality of life issues. And when we have that as our mission of maybe attacking those livabilities or quality of life issues, you take care of those residents. You make that place safer, cleaner, everything else before it becomes a crime-infested
correct
hellhole, really.
The old broken windows type thing.
Exactly. It's a proven theory, and we might as well embrace it. And really, it makes our job better. I think. I mean, as a deputy, I would rather go out and be busy all night long than sit and do nothing or not want to do anything.
Well, I tell people too, when you and I were young patrol officers, if you had a homeless problem, it would be one guy on the corner of walk and don't walk. We'd go up there and say, hey, you got to get your stuff and move out of here. And that would be it.
Yeah. And they would leave.
And they would leave.
Yeah.
But it's totally changed now. And I think we've had to also, it has to start from us at the top, but you have to make sure that we're evaluating our officers on those also. I get amazed sometimes. I remember last year we had 3 homicides in one weekend. And then I had my normal 20 meetings the next week in the community and stuff like that. And I didn't get asked one question about 3 homicides in our city, but I heard a lot about the encampment that was here, and I get it. Those are big issues, but I hear more about that than anything. So
because that affects people on a daily basis, whether they're trying to take their kids to school, go to the grocery store, get their hair done, their nails done, their whatever it is. That's something that's right in your face all the time. And the homicides, while we do everything we can to stop those, I mean, it doesn't get any worse than a homicide.
That's right.
A lot of people are, I don't want to say immune to that, but they may have their head in the sand about that because it didn't affect them or it didn't affect somebody that they knew. And so, but those things you see every day. And I certainly want to, I want to make it perfectly clear to all of our listeners and viewers, in the city of Riverside and in the surrounding areas that we control, we're constantly talking about this and how we're working together to address some of the homeless issues. And the last thing we want to do is I don't want to make it your problem, and I don't want you to fix your problem by making it my problem. So we are, and I'll speak for the rest of the chiefs also, in those meetings that we're having, is we're trying to figure out a universal countywide way of making this happen, working with the county agencies that are dealing with it, or our nonprofits. We're really pushing those a lot.
Yes.
But we are working hand in hand and constant communication. It's nice that our offices are, I can yell out my window and get
apart,
your attention.
exactly.
But our residents should know that we're working together to fix a lot of the problems that go on, whether it's homeless or whether it's gangs from Moreno Valley or Harupa that are doing something in Riverside, or the Riverside gangs doing it in the other areas. And then you always run that risk of them not liking each other and hurting each other or neighbors. And so our job is not only just being friends as heads of the agency, but real leaders with our agencies to making sure that we're all doing the same thing with each other.
And you never want to forget the victims. I mean, the victims of these violent crime, because we've had a little spike in there, and it's for like we said earlier, the guns that are on the street. There's a lot of people that should be incarcerated that are not. But I will say this: when it gets to the livability issues, is I understand. As recent as like 5 years ago, we would go to community meetings and get beat up pretty bad about the homeless situation. You're not doing your job. You're not doing. I think they realize that it's a little bit above our head. That things need to be changed in the legislation for us to do our job back. Because you and I can never go to a meeting and say, hey, my hands are tied, we can't do it. We're not going to say that. We're always going to show up. You call it, we will always be there. We will do everything we possibly can, but nothing we can't.
Right.
So I think they understand that now. They know there needs to be some changes in the legislation. And that's one thing I think that we're trying to continually dialogue with our local legislators, like we have as a group. All the
we're taking
chiefs.
a more vocal stance with our legislators.
Yep, absolutely. And I
to
think
get
that's
their
important.
help. Yeah.
Whereas before we just, whatever happens, I stay apolitical as a police chief. Whatever the law is, I'm going to enforce it. But when you see some type of legislation that's trying to be passed, I want to make sure our legislators know, hey, this is not good, or this is good. But I want to make sure they can hear us as a unified voice. And that's hopefully will help us in the future.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't know why this just popped into my head, but thinking about you and I and even about our other police chiefs that we have around, I think we may be a little bit unique in that we all started a few years
around each other.
Yeah. And we grew up with each other. So it's that relationship that we have when you took over as a chief, it's like, I mean, that's normal. That's hey, Larry, congratulations.
Yeah.
And I think that's carrying over into how we're working together because we did it as deputies and cops.
Yeah.
And
right here in the same city.
Exactly.
It builds that trust within us. And, I've told people in the last 30 years, I'm really the only inside chief. We had one inside chief for a very short time, but everybody else has been from the outside. The guy that hired me, the chief that hired me was from San Diego PD. We had a chief for 10 years from LAPD, another chief from LA for 10 years. So it was nice to come in as an inside guy. And I'll be quite honest, we went through some things as an agency where we probably needed outside influence. But I give credit to even my predecessor, Sergio Diaz, who left this department in good enough shape to where, hey, maybe an inside guy can take over. And then, but like you said, it kind of culminated into, hey, Eddie Poos got the Hemet job, and Bob Newman, another inside from Corona, got the job. Guys that you've known your whole career. So I think we built that trust and that communication over the years, which makes it nice for us to work together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we'll continue doing it. I think that's
absolutely.
We may get from all of these kids. I had a orientation this morning from a graduation last night, and I'm looking around, and they're younger than my kids.
Yeah.
And but with that, I will say that you and I are still young enough that we'll be around here for quite some time. I hope.
I don't have any plans on leaving.
Yeah.
Soon,
so we'll continue the good work that we're doing, working together, and making sure that Riverside and Riverside County are well protected from their police agency
Absolutely.
And from their sheriff's department. So for everybody out there listening, if you have any questions, comments, make sure you respond. And if there's something there, I know the chief made a comment about homelessness and us working on homelessness. I think we could probably make it an entirely new podcast about our working relationship and how we're trying to deal with that. Yeah. So we may have to have you back and talk a little bit about that.
Talk about some of our teams that we put into play and just like you guys have, and we're moving forward.
Absolutely. Larry, Chief Gonzalez, thank you for being on the show.
You,
Appreciate you being here. And for all of you, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Roundup.